Borders are supposed to define where one country ends and another begins, but what if they didn't? Across the world, there are places that laugh in the face of geography, where nations overlap, time splits in two, and one wrong step could land you in a different country, or even a different day. From towns divided by invisible lines to islands that change owners twice a year, these are the world's strangest borders, where politics, geography, and sheer coincidence collide in the most mind-boggling ways. The town that exists in two countries at once. In most parts of the world, crossing from one country to another means showing your passport, going through customs, maybe even switching languages or currencies. But in one small town in Europe, you can cross a national border simply by walking across your living room. Welcome to Baarle, a quiet, picturesque town that's split between Belgium and the Netherlands, and quite literally one of the most confusing borders on Earth. Half of it is called Baarle-Nassau, Dutch territory, and the other half is Baarle-Hertog, Belgian territory. But here's where things get truly strange. It's not one clean line dividing the two. Instead, it's a chaotic patchwork of over 30 enclaves and counter-enclaves, some just a few meters wide, scattered throughout the town like puzzle pieces that were never put back correctly. You can be standing in the Netherlands, take 3 steps forward, and suddenly you're in Belgium. In some cases, the borderline literally cuts through buildings, homes, restaurants, and even bedrooms. The border is marked on the ground with white crosses and metal studs, so you always know exactly where one country ends and the other begins. There's one famous cafe where the kitchen is in Belgium, but the dining area is in the Netherlands. The owners even keep 2 sets of licenses and follow 2 sets of laws, one for each side of the building. Some homes have their front door in one country and their backyard in another, and legally, your nationality depends on where your front door is located. During the pandemic, the absurdity became even more visible. Dutch restrictions were different from Belgian ones, meaning one side of the street could stay open while the other was forced to close. This tangled border traces its roots back to medieval land swaps between the Duke of Brabant, whose lands became part of Belgium, and the Lords of Breda, whose territories became Dutch. When modern nations formed, no one wanted to reopen that ancient mess, so they just left it as it was. Today, the people of Baarle see it not as a problem, but as a symbol of peace and cooperation. Belgian and Dutch police work together, services are shared, and tourists come from around the world just to take selfies with one foot in each country. It's one of those rare places where geography, history, and politics collide, creating a town that truly exists in 2 countries at once. Because in Baarle, borders don't divide people, they just run through their front yards. The bridge where you change countries mid-walk. There are few places on Earth where you can cross an entire international border just by taking a few casual steps. No customs, no immigration, just one simple walk. But on the Oresund Bridge, every step takes you closer to a new country. Stretching across the chilly waters of the Oresund Strait, this incredible structure connects Copenhagen, Denmark, with Malmö, Sweden. 2 nations, 2 cultures, one continuous bridge. It's over 16 kilometers long, part bridge and part underwater tunnel, and it's one of the most impressive pieces of engineering in modern Europe. The journey begins on the Danish side as a bridge, soaring above the sea with sweeping views of the horizon. But halfway through, the bridge suddenly disappears, diving into an artificial island called Peberholm. From there, it transforms into a tunnel that continues beneath the water until it emerges on Swedish soil. The crossing itself takes about 10 minutes by car or train, but in that short time, you switch countries, languages, currencies, and even speed limits. Denmark drives on the right, Sweden drives on the right too, but they have different laws, electrical systems, and police jurisdictions. And yet somehow, it all works flawlessly. The Oresund Bridge isn't just a link between 2 nations, it's a symbol of unity. When it opened in 2000, it effectively turned Denmark and southern Sweden into a single metropolitan region. Thousands of people now live in one country and work in the other, crossing the border daily as if it were just another commute. But what really makes it fascinating is that invisible moment mid-journey, when your GPS flickers, your phone switches networks, and without realizing it, you've stepped from one sovereign state into another. A simple bridge that turns an ordinary drive into an international crossing. Proof that sometimes borders don't divide us. They connect us. The airport that lies in two countries. Airports are usually symbols of connection, places where borders blur and people from around the world cross paths. But there's one airport where that idea becomes literal. Because this airport doesn't just connect flights, it connects two countries. Welcome to Geneva Airport, officially known as Aéroport de Genève, a unique international terminal that belongs to Switzerland, yet also operates partly in France. Located right along the Franco-Swiss border, this airport was built so close to the line that engineers decided to make it work for both nations at once. It has two entrances, one in Switzerland and one in France. Step through one side, you're under Swiss control. Walk a few meters through another door, and suddenly you're in French territory, without even leaving the building. This strange setup was born from necessity. When the airport expanded after World War II, there simply wasn't enough land on the Swiss side. So Switzerland struck a deal with France, allowing part of the facility to extend across the border in exchange for shared access. That's how the French sector of Geneva Airport was born, a secure area that lets French passengers arrive or depart without officially entering Switzerland. Inside, the border is marked by signs rather than fences. You can literally walk from Switzerland to France within the same terminal, crossing an international boundary just by passing through a door. For decades, that door was locked at night and guarded during border hours, a reminder that even in a building of glass and steel, borders still exist, if only on paper. Today, it's one of the few airports in the world where your nationality, visa, and ticket can change the route you take to the same plane. It's also a symbol of how cooperation can turn geography's limitations into global gateways, because here, even the runway ignores political boundaries. Geneva Airport proves that borders don't always separate nations. Sometimes they're just lines drawn under a shared sky. The house cut in half by a border. For most people, crossing an international border means driving for hours or lining up at immigration counters. But for a few families around the world, the border runs right through their homes. One of the most famous examples stands in the strange town of Baarle, the same place where Belgium and the Netherlands are hopelessly tangled in a patchwork of enclaves. Here, a few houses are literally split in two by the national boundary. The line runs across floors, under tables, and straight through people's living rooms. The division is marked with white crosses on the ground, and each home displays a small flag or a number indicating which side its front door is on. That single detail determines everything, from your postal address and tax system to which emergency services respond when you call for help. There's one well-known house where the front door opens into the Netherlands, while the kitchen and bedroom are technically in Belgium. In this home, walking to the fridge means crossing a border. Families joke that they leave the country several times a day without ever stepping outside. This odd arrangement dates back to centuries-old land swaps between medieval lords, when property rights mattered more than national lines. When Belgium and the Netherlands became separate nations, no one dared untangle the centuries of deeds and boundaries, so the lines simply stayed where they were. And Baarle isn't the only place like this. Along the US-Canada border, there's a house in Beebe Plain, Vermont, where the international line passes straight through the living room. One side of the house lies in the United States, the other in Canada. Even the Haskell Free Library and Opera House just a few kilometers away was deliberately built straddling the border, its reading room in the US and its stage in Canada. Patrons can literally borrow a book in one country and return it in another. For the people who live in these places, borders aren't barriers. They're just invisible lines beneath the carpet, reminders that politics can divide nations but not necessarily neighbors. Because sometimes the line between two countries isn't drawn on a map, it's drawn across someone's living room floor. The island that changes owners twice a year. In a quiet stretch of the Bidassoa River between France and Spain, there's a tiny patch of land that looks completely ordinary. A small island, covered in trees, with no permanent residents. But this island hides one of the strangest diplomatic arrangements in the world. It's called Pheasant Island, or Isla de los Faisanes in Spanish, and every 6 months it changes countries. From February to July it belongs to Spain. From August to January it belongs to France. No wars, no arguments, no chaos, just a peaceful scheduled transfer of sovereignty twice a year. a ritual that's been going on for more than 360 years. The island itself is barely 200 meters long, and visitors aren't allowed without special permission. Yet, it has witnessed some of the most significant events in European history. In 1659, it became the site of the Treaty of the Pyrenees, which ended a long and brutal war between France and Spain. The treaty redrew the border along the Pyrenees Mountains and declared the tiny island a condominium, shared by both nations equally. To honor that deal, they decided to alternate control of the island every 6 months. Even today, military officers from both countries meet ceremonially on its soil twice a year to exchange responsibility. What makes it even more fascinating is how invisible this border is. No walls, no checkpoints, just the slow flow of the river around a piece of land that belongs to two countries, one after another, forever caught in a peaceful rhythm of political time-sharing. It's a symbol of how even history's fiercest rivals can find balance, an island that doesn't belong to one side or the other, but to the idea of cooperation itself. Because in a world where borders so often divide us, Pheasant Island proves that sometimes they can be shared. The country that moved its border for a bridge. Borders are supposed to be permanent, carved into maps, guarded by treaties and defended by history. But in one quiet corner of Europe, two countries decided to do something almost unthinkable. They moved their international border, peacefully, just to make a bridge work. This happened between Belgium and the Netherlands, two neighbors known for their famously confusing frontiers. The story centers on a picturesque stretch of the Meuse River, near the Belgian village of Vizé and the Dutch town of Isden. For centuries, the river formed the natural boundary between the two countries. But rivers, as it turns out, don't stay still. Over time, the Meuse began to shift its course, winding and curving until the border on paper no longer matched the border in reality. In some places, this created strange pockets of land, small pieces of Belgium trapped on the Dutch side, and vice versa. These areas became a legal nightmare. Who polices them? Whose laws apply? Even emergency services were confused. Then, in 2016, both countries did something extraordinary. Instead of fighting over the land or fencing it off, they agreed to redraw the border entirely. Belgium officially ceded around 16 hectares of land to the Netherlands, while the Dutch gave a smaller piece in return. The new border followed the modern curve of the river, cleaning up the centuries-old confusion. The exchange was so friendly that diplomats met on a boat in the middle of the river to sign the agreement. No soldiers, no disputes, no tension. The Belgian king and Dutch king even praised it as a model of international cooperation. The whole point of the adjustment was to make way for a new bridge and recreational area, ensuring smoother access and better management of the riverbanks. The result? A modern border that makes sense, drawn not by conquest, but by consensus. It's a rare story in human history, a border moved not through war or greed, but through mutual trust and logic. Because sometimes, progress requires redrawing the lines that once divided us. The lake that belongs to two countries and two continents. At first glance, it looks like just another stretch of calm, cold water surrounded by vast open land. But this lake holds a secret no other body of water can claim. It sits between two countries and straddles two continents. Welcome to Lake Oves, also known as Oves Nur, a massive inland lake shared by Russia and Mongolia, and lying right across the invisible divide between Europe and Asia. The lake itself is ancient, more than 3 million years old, and so large that it forms the largest basin in all of Central Asia. On its southern shores, the dry steppes of Mongolia stretch endlessly, while to the north, Russia's Siberian wilderness begins. One half of the lake lies on the Asian side of the continental boundary, and the other half lies on the European side, making Oves Nur a meeting point of two worlds, both geographically and culturally. This dual identity is mirrored in its ecosystem. Despite being shallow and salty, the lake supports a stunning variety of life, from desert foxes and steppe eagles to migratory birds that travel thousands of kilometers to nest along its edges. The region around it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized jointly by both Russia and Mongolia as one of the last untouched ecosystems on Earth. But what makes Lake Oves truly mind-boggling isn't just its biodiversity, it's what it represents. It blurs every line humans have tried to draw: country, continent, and climate. In one place, you can literally stand on the border between two nations and two continents, with the icy Siberian tundra to your north and the sun-scorched Mongolian desert to your south. It's a reminder that while humans love to divide the planet into neat little boxes, nature doesn't play by those rules. Because at Lake Ovs, geography itself refuses to choose sides. The border marked by a tree. In a world where borders are guarded by fences, rivers, and stone pillars, there exists one line between nations marked by something far simpler: a single tree. In a small, quiet spot between Germany and the Netherlands, near the village of Vaals, stands an old beech tree known locally as the Drielandenpunt, or Three-Country Point. But centuries ago, before the borders were officially defined, there were times when this single tree wasn't just a local landmark. It was a literal boundary marker separating nations. Before modern surveying tools and satellite maps, natural features like trees, rocks, and streams often defined borders. They were living signposts of territory, respected by farmers, kings, and armies alike. In this case, the tree at Vaals marked the convergence of three different lands: the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Kingdom of Prussia, now Germany, and a tiny forgotten state called Neutral Moresnet, a sliver of land that existed for over a century because no one could agree on who it belonged to. At the time, this single tree represented an intersection of ideologies, monarchies, and disputes. Travelers could circle around it and within seconds cross three different countries. Local legends say merchants once used it as a meeting point, smugglers used it to avoid taxes, and lovers met under it to escape the rules of their respective nations. The original tree is long gone, but the tradition lives on. Today, a marker still stands in its place, surrounded by trails and flags, and you can still walk in circles around the spot where three nations once met under the shade of a single trunk. It's a small reminder of how simple things once carried immense significance. Before GPS, before walls, before maps were perfect, a tree could define the limits of empires. Because in the end, even something as fragile as nature once decided where one country ended and another began. The city with a different country inside it. Imagine walking through a city and suddenly finding yourself in an entirely different country without crossing a checkpoint, border gate, or even realizing it. It sounds impossible, but that's exactly what happens in Rome, Italy. Right in the heart of the city lies the world's smallest independent nation, Vatican City. Surrounded entirely by Rome, it's not just a landmark or museum, but a sovereign state with its own government, laws, and even passports. Covering just about 44 hectares, less than half a square kilometre, it's home to around 800 residents, most of whom are clergy, Swiss guards, and officials of the Catholic Church. Vatican City was officially established as an independent state in 1929 through the Lateran Treaty signed between the Holy See and Italy. Since then, it has operated completely independently. It mints its own euro coins, runs its own post office, and even has a tiny railway station. Yet, you can stroll from Rome's busy streets into St. Peter's Square without ever noticing you've just crossed an international border. What's even more fascinating is how the Vatican's existence affects Rome itself. Italian police guard the outer perimeter, but once you step through the massive colonnades, you're technically under Vatican jurisdiction. The Pope is both the religious leader of over 1 billion Catholics and the sovereign monarch of this miniature nation. It's a surreal blend of the sacred and the political. A walled city-state entirely surrounded by another city, yet commanding influence across the globe. So the next time someone says you can't be in two countries at once, remember Rome. Because within its streets lies a country of its own, a world within a world. Would you like me to continue with the mountain peak shared by three nations next? It would fit perfectly with this series. The village where today and tomorrow exist side by side. There's a tiny village on the far edge of the Pacific where time itself seems to split in two. A place where one side lives in today, and just a few steps away, it's already tomorrow. Welcome to the Diomede Islands, two specks of land floating in the Bering Strait between Alaska, USA, and Siberia, Russia. The two islands, Big Diomede, Russian, and Little Diomede, American, are separated by just 3.8 kilometers, 2.4 miles, of icy water. But here's the twist. Between them runs not just a national border, but the international date line, the invisible divider between one calendar day and the next. That means when it's Friday morning on the American side, it's already Saturday on the Russian one. Locals call them the Tomorrow Island, Big Diomede, and the Yesterday Island, Little Diomede. From one island, you can literally see the future, just across the frozen sea. Once, native Inupiat families lived freely between both islands, hunting and trading across the ice. But during the Cold War, the Soviet Union evacuated Big Diomede's residents and turned it into a military outpost. Today, only Little Diomede remains inhabited. About 80 people live there, technically in the US, but just a short helicopter flight away from another country and another day. In winter, the sea freezes solid, creating a surreal landscape where you could, in theory, walk from today into tomorrow in just a few minutes. It's one of the few places on Earth where the concept of time zones becomes almost poetic, a living border between the present and the future. So if you ever dream of time travel, you don't need a machine. You just need to visit the Diomede Islands, where tomorrow is always waiting across the water. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that blur the line between the impossible and the real.